Here's to being single again. Jenna Jo raised her vodka soda and clinked it against her best friend's beer bottle at the Wrigleyville bar on the north side of Chicago. Despite the sparse Tuesday night scene, music still blared over the speakers, as if trying to make up for the thin crowd. The loud thump of the bass made it hard to converse, but that was fine by Jenna. The last thing she felt like doing was talking about how she and Jax had broken up again. That made 3 times. Maybe this time was the charm, but she doubted it. Jax was like crack. The more she tried to quit him, the worse the withdrawal. "You're better off without that arsehole," Maddie yelled over the music, taking a big swig of a beer. Maddie hated Jax, which Jenna understood, because sometimes Jenna hated him too. Like 2 days ago when she'd found him trawling for hookups on Tinder. Reasons for breakup number 3. I mean it. He takes you for granted. He's totally self-centered. He's toxic. Toxic. Usually when Jenna broke up with Jax, her friends' bitter ravings about her ex made her feel better. But tonight, Maddie's endless bashing of Jax just made Jenna feel depressed. She really felt her whole life was on a vicious loop that ended here every 3 months. Jenna complaining that Jax had slept around again, swearing she'd never take him back again, only to do so a few months or weeks later, repeating the whole cycle again. 2 guys tumbled through the revolving door, bringing with them a blast of late fall Chicago air. In the summer, their Wrigleyville neighborhood teemed with Cubs fans and late-night parties almost every day of the week, the home of drunken karaoke and occasional bar fight. But the Cubs finished their season more than a month ago, and now Clark Street felt like a frat row during the winter break. The 2 guys, decent enough looking, eyed Maddie and Jenna as they slid into empty seats down the bar. Jenna couldn't believe she looked anything other than a mess. Runny eye makeup bleeding over the creases of her almond-shaped eyelids, her dark, nearly black hair up in a hasty ponytail. She wore the same outfit she had on at work. Skinny black wool leggings tucked into her brand new kid leather stiletto boots, and her once crisp Oxford. That looked wilted, carried a faint stain on the pocket from lunch. Maddie was impeccable as ever. Blonde hair and long flowing layers that somehow always made her look like she was Venus in that famous Botticelli painting, standing in front of a giant shell. They'd been friends since she was in kindergarten, growing up in the northern burbs together. Jenna used to be jealous of her pretty friend, but she'd found that they'd hardly ever attracted the same kind of guys, and besides, Maddie was off the market. Jenna had been too. Well, until today. Damn Jax. Jenna knew Maddie was right about him. Had been right from the start, but it didn't change the fact that Jenna couldn't quite fully understand how someone so amazingly delicious in bed was toxic everywhere else in life. And winter was coming. She thought of all the happy couples out there who paired up, ready to hibernate on their couches all winter, to fuck their way to spring. Jax was supposed to be her hibernation buddy. Of course, he was more than that, and Jenna knew it. Jax, who'd played 2 years of pro football, possessed a still ridiculous CrossFit body. Adding that to the sensual intensity that he carried with him all the time made him, well, crack. He was crack. Even though he had no real ambitions besides serving up drinks at a local bar. Well, it didn't matter. He was still crack. She thought about the barely even apologetic look on his face when she caught him setting up that Tinder meet. Don't pretend you didn't see this coming. You know me, Jay. That was the worst part. She did know Jax better than anyone. She knew he couldn't be faithful. He said it was a man's biological imperative to need new conquests. He didn't even bother to pretend. She just used to tell herself she appreciated the honesty, that all guys felt that way. But at least Jax was honest about it. She knew he wouldn't be with just one woman, and most of the time she could convince herself that that was fine that way. That it was just light fun, and who cared? She didn't want to marry Jax, and yet it still hurt. She had to admit it. What you need to do is get off this Jack's phase, Maddie declared, clinking her beer bottle too hard on the worn lacquer of the bar. Can you really call a year a phase? The minute the words were out of her mouth when it hit her. She met Jax a year ago. She'd been hopping in and out of his bed, in and out of this so-called relationship with him for all of that time. That was either proof they ought to be together or clear evidence she needed to find someone else. She didn't know if Jax was her soulmate or if he was her worst nightmare. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. You're as much to blame as Jax is. You keep going back for more. And Jenna hated it when Maddie was so right. I know. Did she ever? She knew what she came back for. The man might not be monogamy material, but he made it his single-minded goal in life to make sure she came again and again, all night long. The thought of him and that little trick he did with his fingers made her want to call off the breakup, end this bitch session with Maddie, and head straight to his apartment. She took another swig of her fourth round drink and realized it was half gone. Uh-oh, not a good sign. She glanced up at the big screen TV above the bar, which flashed a commercial of some hunky Tay Diggs lookalike model shaving. That guy in his six-pack has nothing on Jax, she thought. Even if Jax didn't have the same handsome face. He'd had his nose broken twice on the football field, but the crooked bridge of his nose just added to his charm. Instantly, she hated her rebellious thoughts. She was supposed to be angry at him. He was toxic. Angrily, she turned her head from the not as cute as Jax model. I wonder what Jax is doing right now. Is he with that Tinder girl? She felt jealousy lick up her spine. I'm addicted, I can admit it, Jenna said. Admitting you have a problem is the first step towards recovery, Maddie quipped, flipping her long blonde hair off one shoulder. The second step is to admit that you want more than to play around. I'm not ready to settle down, Jenna declared, eyeing the sparkling diamond Maddie wore on her finger with some measure of mistrust. Granted, Maddie's fiancé was amazing in every way. Cute, thoughtful, good at hauling and putting together IKEA furniture. There were perks to being engaged, but Jenna couldn't imagine taking that step yet. She'd not met anyone, including Jax, she'd wanted to spend the rest of her life with. She'd grown up with parents who never stopped arguing, and in her mind, marriage equaled an endless merry-go-round of fights and slow, bitter backslide into divorce. You don't have to get married, Jenna, but how about you admit that you want a relationship? Stop pretending that you and Jax want the same things. But Jax is fun, and fun is no pressure. Jenna didn't do well with pressure. She'd run screaming from her college boyfriend when he'd hinted that he wanted to get engaged. That was 3 years ago, and now she'd just turned 26. She had plenty of time to worry about all of that. Maddie took a swig of her drink and shook her head. Jax is not fun when he's cheating on you. Maddie had a point there. That part wasn't very fun at all. Yeah, but can you call it cheating if we never really agreed to being exclusive? Well, are you sleeping with anyone else? No. Does it hurt when he does? Maddie asked. Jenna nodded. And does he know this hurts you? Yeah. Then it's both your faults. But still, one of you needs to end it for good. It's not healthy. You're not getting what you need. Okay, maybe you're right. I am right, Maddie said with confidence. So the next step is finding someone new. She rolled the beer bottle around in her hand, studying it as if Jenna's new rebound would be found in there. What about Jack? Jack? Jenna's thoughts reluctantly left Jax as she focused on her friend. Jack. My boss Jack. Suddenly, Jenna felt sober. Jack was a gorgeous young director who'd only recently moved here from Ireland. You know I can't. Company policy. At this point, I don't care. Jack is hot. He is nice. He's got that killer accent, and anyone is better than Jax. Maddie didn't lie. Jack, with the gravelly brogue, piercing blue eyes, and the always there stubble caught the eye of every woman, and some of the men at Jenna's agency. Jenna had noticed. Who wouldn't? Those broad shoulders and flat stomach were meant for the cover of a romance novel. but he was the boss and he was off limits. Period. Besides, pretty boys like Jack never went for Jenna. She always got the rough around the edges types, like Jack's. She didn't know why, but this was the cardinal rule of her dating universe. It had been since high school. Pretty boys went for Maddie, rough ones for Jenna. Maybe they could all sense the goth period she went through in high school. Whatever the reason, she'd given up on pursuing guys who looked like Jack. I'd rather he get fired than get back with Jax, Maddie stared at Jenna until she blinked and looked away. Maddie let out a frustrated sigh. Fine. How about them? Maddie nodded towards the guys down the bar. One of them caught Jenna's eye and raised his beer mug, sloshing it out at the side. They're drunk. Jenna took a final swig of her drink and realised it was all gone. She glared with one eye at the remaining ice cubes, wondering where all her vodka had gone. So are you, Maddie gave her friend a shove, nearly knocking her off the bar stool to prove the point. I'm fine. I'm going to the bathroom, Jenna declared, slipping off the bar stool. The room took a little spin as she stood on wobbly legs, realising for the first time how drunk she was. She managed to steady herself and walk in almost straight line to the bathroom. The guys at the bar eyed her as she went. The want on their faces obvious as they watched her wobble by in her knee-high boots. Jenna worked hard to stay in shape, and she had her parents' amazing Korean genes. She knew she turned heads at the bar even when she wasn't trying. Jax, after all, didn't spend time with uglies, as he called the girls not to his standards. God, what a jerk, she thought, in a more sobering moment. Jax really was an arsehole. Still, didn't part of her like that she met his standards? Laughed when he made fun of ugly girls? Terrible. Truly terrible. One of the guys at the bar nodded as she walked past. Not my type, she thought. Average, if anything, and a sloppy drunk. One of the guys had a nacho stain down the front of his shirt and the beginnings of a soft beer belly. Nothing like Jax. There wasn't anything soft about Jax. At the thoughts of him, her body instantly responded, her belly growing warm. Damn, Jax. Once in the bathroom, her phone pinged an incoming text. She realised it was a work phone. They had a big clients campaign launching this week, and everyone on her team was pretty much on call for possible problems. Jenna, the graphic designer, might be called on to log in at 10, fix a graphic or make a last-minute change. She couldn't even be out drinking. She told herself she'd just have one drink, 2 at most. But her willpower dissolved somewhere around the end of the second round, probably because the more she talked about Jax, the more she wanted to drink. She'd hoped the text wasn't work-related, but then she glanced at the face of the phone, and she saw that it wasn't work texting her at all. Jax's name lit up on the face of the phone, along with his 2 messages. Jenna hurried into the nearest stall, her heart racing, as if she worried Maddie would burst in at any second and catch her reading them. Baby, I'm sorry. I miss you. Jenna blinked and looked away from her phone. He had some nerve texting her work phone. She told him dozens of times not to do it, that she might get in trouble. But Jax wasn't the type to care about company rules, or any rules for that matter. Still, seeing Jax's name on her phone made her heart sore, which her brain knew was all wrong. She shouldn't feel glad he texted. She should ignore him. She deleted all the text in a fit of rage. Then, she wished she hadn't. Did he really miss her? God, why do you care? That vicious voice of reason screamed in her head. Of course he misses you. His Tinder hookup must have fallen through. Jenna started typing a message. She'd tell him. But she'd tell him to his face. She stormed out of his apartment yesterday and hadn't been back since. She had a whole lot to tell him. We need to talk. She hit send and waited. She swayed on her feet, then a Sam Smith song. One that Jax had sung to her as he undressed her just last weekend piped in over the bathroom speakers. She remembered a zipper in his teeth as he tried to sing and felt shivers down her spine. The alcohol made her feel fuzzy and adrift. Why was she so mad at Jax? What she wanted was to get naked with him. Drunk, it sounded fine. One more hookup. What could it hurt? Like a farewell to her. Maybe that's what she needed to get him out of her system for good. Just one more sleepover. She knew she was in a bad place. One minute she wanted to shout at Jax, and the next she wanted to strip. Jenna needed to get her emotions straight. One more hookup. Maybe that's what she needed. She couldn't tell Maddie, or she'd talk her out of it. She'd never have to know. I know you want me. You should want me. I'm the best you'll ever have. She sent the text and giggled. She slipped into the role of sex pop star goddess easily, and it was something she and Jax did. She waited, staring at a screen, which seemed to be a bit wiggly. Bit blurry, a bit of a mess. Why was the phone so blurry? Oh, right, I'm drunk. She wanted to giggle, but instead she put out a hand against the stall door to steady herself. She blinked once more to focus, and found a message popped up in answer. When? Where? Good, Jax was playing along. My place. Tonight. Jack Kearney had never done anything so crazy before. Met a girl at nearly midnight on a Tuesday. And not just any lass, one who worked for him. Jenna Cho. He'd never in a million years expected her to text him. But there she had. I know you want me. You should want me. I'm the best you'll ever have. There wasn't anything hotter than a confident girl who knew exactly what she wanted. Jack was hooked the second the text came in. Jack locked the back door of his sleek townhome in Old Town as he trotted out into the small yard and to his waiting parking space in the back alley, wishing he could teleport himself over to Jenna's place and not even bother with the car. Jack was used to female attention. His wicked smile and lean athletic physique had gotten him more than kisses in alleyways and bars across Dublin where he'd grown up, a streak that had continued when he jumped the pond to go to Chicago 2 years ago. He'd been propositioned before, but never in the middle of the night. Even at Hugh, he'd had a policy to turn down the advances from nearly every department. He never used to mix business and pleasure. But Jenna was different. My place, tonight. The thought sent a thrill through him. He hated that he was so excited by the prospect. He should have ignored the text. She'd been drinking. It was probably a mistake. And yet, he had to know for sure. Jack had been drawn to Jenna from the minute they'd met. He'd had a string of blonde and redhead freckled beauties back in Ireland. He'd loved and left, but Jenna was different. It wasn't just that she was dark-haired and gorgeous. She always seemed so out of reach, so completely immune to his charms. He'd tried, against all his better judgment, and yet she remained completely and totally aloof, maddeningly professional. And then, out of the clear blue, this. You're gonna lose your job, he muttered to himself, shaking his head at his own foolishness as he opened the garage door, revealing his sleek, freshly washed BMW. Not that he was particularly worried about this job, or even really planned to keep it much longer. He reminded himself. Still, he should have ignored the text. It was like he was going to take advantage of a drunk lass, one who could get you fired, or sued, or worse. His ma had raised him better than that. Old Mrs. Kearney would not approve. And she'd berate him to no end, and if she didn't, one of his 4 sisters would have something to say about it. Growing up the only boy in a house full of women taught him a few things about respecting ladies. But he had to know. Did she secretly feel the same way about him? He'd been soft on her for months. She'd gotten under his skin like a bad rash. You're being an arse, he mumbled to himself, but that still didn't stop him from sliding into the front seat of his Beamer and starting the engine. And if he ran over there and slept with her, then what? Most American girls he'd met were not ready for relationships. Sure, they'd muck about for a while, but when it came to the serious talks about exclusivity, they'd go all pale and start blubbering about not being ready to settle down. Somewhere between Ireland and here, the roles had all been switched around. He didn't quite understand it. In Ireland, he'd been an unapologetic serial monogamist. He craved a relationship with one woman at a time. His sister may have told him he fell in love too easily. But he thought women were supposed to want that, not the ones he'd met so far. He hadn't known if it was just his rotten luck or if women were different in America, but it seemed all they were into was partying and shagging anything that moved. The last time he fell for a girl, she'd been dating 2 other guys at the same time. He should have learned his lesson then. But here he was again, falling for a girl before he even knew her. Did she just want a shag like the rest of them, or was she fishing for more? He wanted a real connection. Did she? Part of him told him he'd just be disappointed, but the part of him that lived below the waist didn't care at the moment. The thought that her hard veneer had finally cracked drove him wild. He backed his car out of the garage space and steered it towards Jenna's condo in Wrigleyville. The fact that he'd memorized her address after only dropping her off once after a photo shoot a few months ago should have raised more warning bells in his head, but didn't. Just hear the lass out and figure out if she feels the same way about me, he thought. Nothing more.